Hello, my name is Dora
Hey,
Diaz. I am the president of the Osceola Democrats. Welcome to Spill the Tea with OYD. This is my co-host.
I am Lee Wright. I am the secretary of Osceola Young Democrats.
And we are here with a candidate for Osceola Sheriff's Department. It is Mike Fisher. Mike, hi, how are you?
hey, I'm great. Fantastic. Thank you guys for having me.
Good. Well, Mike, so we are here. We wanted to get to know you a little bit more. And our first question, since you spilled the tea, I have a little bit of just tea with lemon, something really basic. How about you? What are you drinking?
I like Irish breakfast tea. It's strong. It's easy, kind of simple. That or coffee. So, but since you said tea, I went with tea.
Yum. Yes, good. So, Mike, what position are you running for, and what does that office do?
So I'm running for Osceola County Sheriff, and the sheriff is the chief law enforcement officer in the county. And in Florida, you have 67 counties, and all 67 but one have an elected sheriff. And that only one county is Miami-Dade. They have an appointed director of the Metro-Dade Police Department. So you vote across the state of Florida for your sheriff in every county, and I'm running for that position here in Osceola.
And so now there's many different races. Is it only Osceola County residents who can vote for you?
Yes, only Osceola County residents, and currently, because the primary is closed, there's 3 Democrats running, so it'll be a closed primary. So only Democrats can vote right now, assuming the independent candidate qualifies. If he does not qualify, it becomes a universal primary where everybody can vote: Democrats, Republicans, and Independents. So, and that will be August 18th.
All right, great, thank you.
Yeah.
So, Mike, as a candidate during social distancing and things like that, what are you doing now to help get your candidacy out there and your campaign out there?
So, when this whole thing started, we kind of had to step back, going out, knocking on doors, and that kind of thing. We really went to a lot of online social media presence and reaching out to people, whether it be via email, via instant messenger, and then we have about 200 volunteers that have signed up for our campaign. So those people are doing the same and just kind of promoting things. And then people call me and talk to me, and like tonight, I've done a ton of Zoom meetings with people, potential donors, and people that want to know about me. I'll tell them, hey, you can either call me on the phone or we can talk via Zoom. So yeah, we've kind of made do. The good thing about it is prior to this whole thing happening, we were able to qualify by petition. So we haven't had to worry about that issue and not getting petitions signed. We were qualified back somewhere by the end of January, 1st of February. So so that's been a relief, and not having to worry about petitions up.
So having said that, we are the Osceola Young Democrats, and we have certain values. So why are you a Democrat?
Why am I a Democrat? So
yeah, so like what makes you choose the Democratic Party?
So to be honest with you, when I first started as a sheriff's deputy at 19 years old, the sheriff was a Democrat, and basically said, "Are you registered to vote?" I said no, and I wasn't at 19 years old. And he said, "Well, if you always want to be able to vote for a sheriff, the sheriff will always be Democrat in this county." And he's been pretty much right, because anybody that has been any consistency in office here as a sheriff has been a Democrat. I mean, you look at the last sheriff we had for 12 years, which is Bobby Ansel. He was a Democrat. So I've just registered Democrat, and I've been that forever. And locally, I look at the best person for the party. I think, honestly, from a sheriff standpoint, there's only like 7 counties in the state of Florida that have nonpartisan sheriffs, Polk County surprisingly being one of them. and I think a sheriff in general, having party lines for a sheriff is for any like tax collector and those kind of things. I don't really think that that's necessary. I think that should be open to everybody to vote for. But being that it isn't, that's just the party I have been with for a number of years. So long before this election ever happened, I can tell you that much. So I'm going to have a drink some of this tea.
Right. Very interesting. I didn't know that like that in Osceola County. I've only been here in Osceola County for like just a couple of years. I'm kind of new to the area.
Right.
So I didn't know that was like a long-standing tradition of the sheriff being a Democrat. So that's very interesting.
It has, yes. So the very first sheriff I worked for, Bob Fornes, was a Democrat. And he was there for a number of years. The one prior to that, K.O. Murphy, same thing, was a Democrat for, 20 plus years. I'm not exactly sure how long his terms were. But then if you go to look at Charlie Croft, he was another one that was consistent with being a Democrat, and he was here for a long term of 8 years. And then we got Sheriff Ansel, and it was 12. Other people that have come and gone in between that, or with other parties, they haven't lasted 4 years, and it's, it's kind of what it is. So, and I never had to switch parties to run, so that's a plus.
Now, specifically, we are young Democrats. Why should we care about it? Why should we support your campaign?
Well, just from reaching out to young Democrats in general, I think, and don't take this the wrong way, a lot of times nobody listens to them, nobody talks to them, and we have done that in our campaign where we have reached out to the 18 to 25-year-old Democrats. One, because I have a number of employees at the sheriff's office that support me, but they have 18 to 25-year-old children that are registered Democrats, and they're graduating from school, they're going into college, and a lot of them are interested in the sheriff's race, number one. Number two, we don't, in high school, you don't really learn a whole lot about the just the voting process in general here locally. You don't really kind of find out about that until you get to college, unless you take a political job, and then you kind of know. But most of the kids that we've been reaching out to that are 18, that are graduating now, that are entering college, that we've talked to, I have a number of people on our campaign that are young, that are Democrats, that have been helping us talk to other young Democrats in Osceola County, telling them, about the voting process, and none of them know about it. And that's shocking. You want them to come out and vote. And that is a big voting block. You figure 18 to 25 years old, there's quite a few people there. And so we've kind of tapped into that through just a number of our volunteers having children that age that are interested and want to get involved. And it's kind of refreshing to see. So we've been taking advantage of that. And again, you got to listen to them. They have great ideas. They're great young minds. They're very tech savvy. And I've always used the term work smarter, not harder from a technology standpoint. And, they bring a lot to the table, that ideas, and they're flexible, they're collaborative. There's a lot of things that, I work at Universal Studios right now, one of the most diverse companies in Central Florida. And I run our security investigations department. And most of the people that work for me are that age range from 18 to 25. And, they're either in college or graduating from college. And some of the ideas they bring up at work, I'm just like, that's a great idea. So I think we just dismiss them because they're young and we're old and we think we know everything. And the reality is we don't. So.
Oh, thank you. Hey, tech savvy.
Yeah. No, I think there's a lot to be brought to the table because, the whole thing about it is a succession, right? So I'm not going to be doing this forever. And the next person in line is going to be your age group. And we want to be able to have those people developed and understand those jobs, whatever it is, when they move into those things. And there's both of my kids, or I should say all three of my kids fall in that millennial class. And they're very bright, young-minded kids. So it's, you develop them, you raise them. That is our future. So we really have to focus on that. And I think, and again, don't get me wrong, from the Democratic side of things, I think we lose focus on that and just bringing them in and just talking to them and letting them know about how really educating them on how the voting process works. Because a lot of them didn't know, they don't know about primaries. They don't know what, the dates, there's date specific. There's a lot of that stuff that a lot of them don't know until they get to college. And then they start learning that political aspect of things. But by then they've already passed up a number of years that they could have voted. So.
Yeah, and I know that's one of the reasons why we really started to push for Osceola Young Democrats to be a thing, is because there are so many issues that are impacted by being civically educated and civically minded. So
exactly.
That said, like, what is the most pressing issue to you? Like, what is your call to action for this race?
For this race in general? Well, I mean, I have a platform, that I would look at, and I have 5 focus points. And, the biggest thing is we have to focus back on real community policing. And what I mean by that is we have to look at it from the aspect of patrol cars on the streets. We need more deputies. We're 47 deputies short right now at the sheriff's office. And we need those officers on the street to interact with the community. Most of our interaction with the community is officers responding to calls. And that's where that real community service takes place. That community engagement takes place and helping those citizens with those problems. When you take 2 and 3 hours to get to a call and you're rushed to get through something, you're really not having the time to problem solve and really perform what community policing should be. Community policing is not going to parades and throwing candy out. That's community engagement. And don't get me wrong, we need community engagement. But the reality is our job is law enforcement. So when we look at that, we have to look at the things of how can we best impact the community and be involved in helping them solve their problems. And I'm talking about crime problems or just disorder in their neighborhoods. There's, gang problems. One of the things that we did when I left the sheriff's office, I ran our gang unit, and we offered a class to teachers to let them know and say, explain to them how they can identify possible gang membership within the school. And it was very informative. But since I've left there, we haven't even done that. And to me, that's a good class to have for a teacher so they can be aware of that kind of stuff and kind of mitigate some of that threat or just be aware of it and relay that to the school resource officer about people that are actually involved in that. So the other thing that I'm really big on is engaging our youth. And I want to engage them. And I know we're big on the school resource thing and getting involved with them in schools, but let's face it, they're not in school every day of the week. So we have to engage them. We have to develop programs that engage them outside of the school. And I'm really big on wanting to do that. We have right now at the sheriff's office, we do not have any program that deals with at-risk youth to address those issues and get involved from a collaborative effort with the family, and work to solve that issue before this kid gets into this, boy or girl gets into the criminal justice system, which is one of the things we want to prevent. So those are 2 of the big things that I'm big on. Homelessness. We've talked about that and what an issue it is here. And most of my career has been spent on the West 192 area, and I really want to have a homeless outreach team here. No law enforcement agency in Central Florida has a dedicated homeless outreach team to work collaboratively with the nonprofits from a law enforcement standpoint. And I'm not talking about arresting homeless people. I'm talking about assisting them in with mental health issues, getting them the right connections, right resources. We're on the ground 24/7. Nonprofits are open 8 to 5 Monday through Friday. We're not 9 times out of 10 when we're dealing with a homeless person, it's because they're in crisis and it's 2 o'clock in the morning and we don't have nowhere to send them. So we have to have some type of team or some type of training, better training, to deal with those crises, availability to take them. When I was here before, a number of years ago, back in the late 90s, we had certain hotels that would allow us to bring a family that was homeless, that was here locally, and give them at least 2 nights in a hotel till they could get connected with resources. And I know we probably still have that to some extent, but most of your street officers don't know that. It's, you go to a parking lot and a family's in the parking lot living out of their car, and the manager of the let's say the Publix there or the complex wants them removed. Your only alternative is issuing a trespass warning and send them on the way. So I think we need to do while it's a society problem, I think law enforcement needs to have a seat at that table, and we've not been at that table for a long time. So that's kind of a long answer, but
I'm like, so Lee and I were both teachers, so we work with students, at-risk students, and
right.
we want a little bit more information on how, like, what plans do you have to strengthen that relationship between law enforcement and students. Yeah,
So
I can keep going on with that, but
yeah, no, and I think one thing in reality is you know, and I know one of the topics you talked about was criminal justice reform. I think from a reform standpoint, we as law enforcement are kind of the gatekeepers of the criminal justice system. We're kind of the entry point level. We have a thing called a juvenile citation for first-time juvenile offenders. We don't make use of that. 22% of the time in the last year, we have used a juvenile citation. So in a year's time, we've had 220 kids eligible to be issued a juvenile citation. And these are kids that are in school that are first-time offenders. We're not talking about kids that are repeat offenders, anything like that. We're talking about kids that are just, they've messed up and they're eligible to be issued a juvenile citation. 220 of them. We are 15th in the state in the number of eligible juveniles that could be given a juvenile citation, and we're only using it 22% of the time. So 48 kids got issued juvenile citations in the last year when we could have given them to 220. Now, domestics are involved in that, but of those domestics, there's about 55 of those 220 that are involved in domestics. So if you look at that and say, okay, well, we have to make an arrest based on state law for a domestic. Okay, take that out of the equation. We're still only using the juvenile citation 29% of the time. So it's very low used. We're taking some of these kids that don't need to be in the criminal justice system, that we could give them a diversion. And again, we're not talking about kids that are just out of control that need to go to jail. We're talking first-time offenders, and these are students, you know, and we're taking them out of jail. And what's really shocking is of that 220, 25% of them, now 25%, a quarter of those kids are 11 and under. That's a shock. So it's like, why are we arresting 11 and under kids? I mean, I just don't, I can't figure that out. When do we have an alternative to that? You know, John Mina in Orange County is looking at possibly fixing the sheriff's office policy to when it comes to domestics and being a little lenient and issuing some of those juvenile citations when it's brother and sister on things, and not having to put that child into the criminal justice system. So I think one of the things needs to help is we could make better use of that on the outside of school. There's a site that you can go to and look how many of those juvenile citations or juvenile offenders are school related as well. I don't know the percentage off the top of my head there at the moment. But the other things that we can do is obviously we have school resource officers in our school, and a number of school resource officers we have, they do a great job in connecting with them. I think, again, the big issue is I think we're doing a fine job at connecting with them in school. I'd like to see more education programs there for at-risk youth that are available. For you as a teacher, if you see a problem with a child, there's some type of program that you could call the sheriff's office and say, hey, you know, this kid might fit the criteria and I see him going down a path, and we can divert that and stop that. We just don't have those programs available. And I think the other thing is, what are they doing outside of school? You know, we need to really take a vested interest in them when they're outside of school, sports programs, the police athletic league. You know, I volunteered a lot in my younger days with youth sports. You know, my dad always used to say, you know, good sports make good kids. So, you know, getting involved in that and having those kind of programs available, and helping the Boys and Girls Club. And I'm on the board of the Boys and Girls Club, and they do a phenomenal job there at preparing these kids. So just having that information and resources available, and the officers, you know, even going by those places and visiting and playing basketball with kids and kind of getting out when they don't have time to take, you know, when they're not taking calls. But, you know, community policing came on the scene in the 90s. And when I was a patrol officer growing up in Bonaventura Lakes, is where I moved to, and I lived at most of my life. I patrolled Bonaventura Lakes, but we'd always patrol with the windows down, and we'd talk to people. we don't see a whole lot of that no more. It's because the guys are going call to call, the windows are up, there's so much data in the car throwing at them. You know, they just don't take time to roll down and just talk to the kids and really know what's going on in their neighborhood. And that again, that goes to being short-staffed. When you have enough staff dedicated to a strong patrol division, you can make those things happen. So hope that answered your question. It kind of went round way.
Why is there a shortage of staff? What's the possible reasons for that?
Well, it's not money, because we certainly have, our budget has went up over $20 million in the last 4 years. So it's not money. We're not making use of our police academy locally. When I've talked to the directors of the academy over there, we're taking maybe 3 and 4 kids out of this academy, and you have 17 to 18 potential people that are coming. I think at some point we're looking for that quintessential perfect cop, and you're not going to get that. We want a diverse work environment that these guys have had, not necessarily criminal backgrounds, but I'm talking about have different life experiences and that type of thing. I mean, we have Lakeland Police Department coming to our police academy in Osceola County and recruiting officers, and they're getting hired in Lakeland and living here and driving to Lakeland when we should be having them here. And these guys live here. They live here. So, the other shortage is we have officers that are officers here, and I know several of them that have been refused to be hired by the sheriff's office for whatever reason, but they're current active law enforcement officers at other agencies. And why would we not hire them? They live in Osceola County. They speak Spanish. It's like they're perfect candidates. They live here. And to me, I would want an officer to work at the sheriff's office that lives in this county, because they have a vested interest. At the end of the day, you go home to Brevard County or North Orlando, and you live in your neighborhood, you don't care what happens here on a daily basis. I don't think you have a real strong tie and vested interest. And that's one of the reasons that, I've raised my family here and we've stayed, and both of my sons work at the sheriff's office and they live here. They raise their kids here. We're part of this community, and I think it makes it better when you have officers that live in the community, because they take pride in that. They understand the problems. It's not just, oh, that's my job, I'm going to go and do whatever, and then I'm going to come back home and ignore the rest of it. So I think there's just a multitude of things. I think there's morale issues at the sheriff's office right now that keep people from hiring. We've had a number of people leave and go to other law enforcement agencies. Some have taken less pay to go to other agencies. And you have to look at that from a systematic approach of how things are. The old saying is people don't leave bad jobs, they leave bad bosses. And that's, unfortunately, that's the way it is. But in 30 years, I've seen that happen at the sheriff's office under other sheriffs. So it's not unique. It just, you need the right leadership in place. So. And
I know Dora was talking earlier about how she was a newer resident, or she hadn't lived in Osceola County for that long. And I've lived here for a little less than a decade. And as a teacher here, I know a lot of my students are transient. So talking about homelessness and having a need for a homelessness coalition and mentioning those families in crisis, Osceola County is, we have a big population growth going on. Right. So my question is going to be, what are some challenges with growth aside from the obvious, having the need for affordable housing and things like that? So what are some challenges with growth from the sheriff's office perspective, and how should we be addressing them?
You talking about like within the sheriff's office jurisdiction, or just countywide, or?
Yeah, countywide, or how should the sheriff's office be, addressing the growth and the, influx of people that are coming here? Like how? Yeah. Because, you mentioned, patrolling communities with the windows down, and a lot of times, those communities have a lot of new residents, or they have a lot of rental properties, and people come and people go. So how should the sheriff's office be addressing, just population growth and transient residents and things like that?
Well, so the biggest thing is, we've been addressing growth for a number of years. I think what you have to do is you kind of have to look at what's called evidence-based policing. You have to look at where your issues are in places. Where the population centers are, where your largest crime is. Because let's face it, I mean, crime in St. Cloud, in the jurisdiction of the sheriff's office in St. Cloud, is very low. But when you add crime from West 192, it's pretty high out there, and that's our largest area. I think from a population growth, that's where we should put most of our resources from the sheriff's office, and inundate that place with enough personnel to adjust for those fluctuations in population. Same with Poinciana. Poinciana grows quite a bit. You know, I mean, you look at Bella Lago, that entire area down there is Sector 4, and in a 12-hour shift, we have on average 4 deputies and a sergeant covering that entire area. That's huge. And that place has been growing even before this sheriff got in office. So it's, again, we're not looking at that as we're just not looking at it from a staffing perspective and saying, this is where I need the people. You know, the English, and I'll use UK's method of policing, they put their police officers where the crime is. Here, because you're a politically elected official, you know, let's say you have 3 officers in St. Cloud, and I'm not saying that's the case, but let's say you have 3 officers in St. Cloud because the crime rate is low, but you have 20 on the other side of the city because the crime rate is high, but you're really making an impact in those places because of the high crime. You run a risk of having the people in St. Cloud complain that you don't have enough personnel covering that area, and they pay taxes, and it becomes this whole political thing where we're not taking a common sense approach to policing. It's like, where's the crime occurring at? That's where we should have the officers at. And that's what goes back to evidence-based policing, is you're policing places, not necessarily people. You're looking at where these problems are. You're using problem solving. And then that's how you kind of adjust to the population, where the population is growing at. We know the population has grown on West 182 considerably. We know the population in the city of Kissimmee has grown, which the Kissimmee Police Department is responsible for. But like in Bonaventura Lakes, the population has grown there. Poinciana, the population has grown there. So I think you have to look at the data that we collect at the sheriff's office and use that and to work smarter, not harder. I think we can do that. And I think we have enough personnel currently at the sheriff's office that you could plug from different places and plug them in those areas right now until we hire enough staff to take that over. But again, it is a personnel management issue. You know, when you have a high risk or a school that has lots of problems at it, and again, I'm not a teacher, but I would think that the school board would say, we need more teachers at this school because we have more students, and not less. And I don't know how that works, but I mean, that just seems common sense that you would say, well, we got 25 kids per class, you know, we need to break classes up, versus you have a small one that has the same amount of teachers in it, that one that is overloaded. You know, so I think we need to look at a common sense approach to staffing that actually can affect the population. I mean, our last UCR stats that came out this year, it showed a reduction in crime, but of course we had a growth in population, but our reported crime went up 1.9%. So crime went up, but the crime rate went down because the population grew. So, so it's kind of a fallacy of, is crime going down? Well, it's really not, because more reported crime, of course, because you have more people. So again, I think looking at that from a staffing approach and using data, data-driven policing, evidence-based policing helps, and technology helps as a force multiplier. You know, and I'm a big technology guy. I love technology in law enforcement. It helps quite a bit. I think that sometimes that costs less than hiring deputies, but it helps them being a force multiplier in policing. It helps collect data quicker. It helps them access stuff. We have one of the best computer-aided dispatch systems in the state of Florida at our agency, and you know, that's great. It helps us considerably. So there are just a lot of things that I think we could do smarter, and you know, that we're not doing. And again, I think that's just from a management perspective, having the experience to understand where those needs are. So I know that's a long answer, but if I get talking too much, you can tell me to shut up.
I'll do the little digital raise my hand.
Now, speaking of this growth, the population challenges, now how does COVID-19, this pandemic, affect the sheriff's department?
Well, I mean, obviously I'm not there, so I don't know specifically what policies they have in place from a staffing level. I do know that they've cut back on some of their staffing at the agency, which is good because you don't need all those people in the building. And, they're doing temperature checks. There's a lot of things that we did during the pandemic of H1N1, with not necessarily temperature checks, but asking certain questions. And when we approach a call, trying to have the call taker or the complainant meet us outside, not go inside the residence. They ask the questions of, have you been to another country? Have you had a fever? We're doing a lot of that stuff now. Supplying them with the proper PPE equipment. Staffing again is while you have a curfew in place, and we've had this stay-at-home order. Naturally, crime's going to go down because there's not a lot of people, and really, to be honest with you, it helps because at 2:00 in the morning, the only people on the streets are cops and the criminals. I mean, they stick out like a sore thumb. So it's like, okay, if they're not going to work, and you can kind of tell when they're riding around the back of a business that's closed, it's like, what are you doing? It's a lot easier to tell that when nobody's supposed to be out. So that makes things a little easier from dealing with the law enforcement response. I'm sure the calls for service are up with people calling, but a lot of them have been able to be answered by phones. So that helps with officers not being exposed to that. KPD, I know, has cut back on their staffing as well. They're offering their officers hazard pay that actually work. So on the days that they're not working, they don't get it, but it helps offset some of the days that they're not there. And internally, staff-wise, I think that they have cut back on non-essential. Let's call it non-essential. I mean, everybody's essential at the sheriff's office. I mean, I don't care what you do there, from the person that checks paperwork to the dispatcher to this. Everyone is essential to the overall operation. But it's just they're trying to limit the exposure of those people coming in and out. So, yeah, I mean, it's just things that we would do. And again, none of us have ever seen this before, where we've closed things down to this level. So we're learning every day. I mean, Universal, I would have never thought for the life of me I would ever saw Universal closed for this long. And I don't know what to say. I mean, the park is empty. When I walk in there, it's just eerie. But again, we're in an unprecedented time, and I think even Universal and Disney is learning daily on how to mitigate this whole thing. So it's a challenge for all of us. So there's no wrong answer, right answer there. I mean, it's kind of like a roll of the dice. You might do the right thing, and then you say, "Oh, that's a horrible idea. Let's change that." You got to be flexible. So.
And then in terms of like the county jail, what are some things that are being put in place to make sure that those aren't like centers of growth for COVID-19?
So the jail, we don't run the jail anymore. The sheriff's office doesn't run the jail. The county commission runs the jail. In '97, I think it was, we separated from the jail. So we're like Orange County. The Orange County Board of County Commissioners runs the jail in Orange County. Down here, the Osceola County Board of County Commissioners runs the jail. They have a jail chief. One of the things they've done is stopped outside transports, though. So if we had a warrant on somebody, let's say in New York, we would make arrangements to go pick that person up. And I worked in fugitive extradition for a while, so you would either go by plane or have a transportation company bring them back to our jail. They've stopped that for now to stop those people coming in from the outside, because we don't know much about them, and kind of coming in from the outside. Doesn't mean we're not arresting people locally on warrants, but we're just not having that transportation stuff happening right now. So they've limited that. Those people stay in jail. Let's say they get a warrant and it's a no bond warrant, and they're in New York. They'll send us confirmation. We'll say, yeah, we have to make some determination at some point whether they stay in jail or we have to let them go. So the jail's kind of mitigated that a little bit. They're not accepting outside prisoner transports. But as far as what they're doing internally, you'd have to refer to the commission for that, because again, we don't run the jail. Seminole County Sheriff's Office still runs their jail, and there is advantages to having the sheriff run the jail, because you can have programs and do things through the jail that Seminole has that we don't have the advantage of doing here, because we don't have control. The sheriff doesn't have control of the jail. You can spend some of your budget money on opioid addiction classes, and I'm not saying our jail doesn't have that, but they work in conjunction with law enforcement. So when we arrest somebody, we can kind of throw them in that program. Or if we arrest somebody for that, the jail is in control of those programs and who gets into them and all that. And I think we need to have better communication with our jail in general, just in how we do things on a day-to-day basis. So I'm sorry I can't answer your question on that about what they're doing specifically.
Is having control over the jail or like a bigger say in the jail something you would advocate for as a sheriff?
Well, they always say as a sheriff, and I mean, this has just been in my 30-year career as a sheriff, the last thing you want is the jail. If you don't have to deal with the jail, that's great, because when we had the jail, that's where probably 80% of our lawsuits came from, just because of treatment issues and that type of stuff, and you have a high liability in a jail. People get sick, so there's a lot of liability issues that come along with a jail and running a jail. I do think that at some point it is helpful for a sheriff to have a jail, because they can have a little bit better process in booking people, getting people out, making sure that that process is faster, more streamlined. Again, but I mean, in Orange County, it works good. And I mean, so far, I've worked with our jail folks here. They're great people. Our corrections officers are great people. Many of them worked for us at one point. So, I can't say whether I'd want to have it or not have it. I mean, I don't know. I mean, if the county commission, and if I were to win, and the commission was to say, hey, look, we'd like the sheriff to take it over, I would absolutely entertain that idea. I mean, I wouldn't say no. Yeah, I mean, because it could help law enforcement in the long run in having designated programs within our agency that we could use, to help us. But that doesn't mean that we can't collaborate with them to create those programs for us, which we should be doing.
So I know that sheriffs work really well. Sorry, Dora. I don't know if you want to jump in on this.
Okay, it's all right.
I feel like I'm like taking over the questions.
It's okay. This is our first time co-hosting, so.
That's okay. That's kind of cool.
We're still feeling our way through it, I guess.
Yeah. I'm not adding it out, so it's keeping in. It's staying in. So, if elected, you have a voice as a member of the Florida Sheriff's Association, and you would help decide the organization's stance on many issues pertaining to law and immigration in our community. So where do you stand on providing driver's licenses to local immigrants?
I have no problem with that. I've told people this before during this conversation, that immigration is a federal issue. We at the sheriff's office in my 30 years there have never driven around looking for illegal immigrants to arrest, period. And we just don't do that. We don't have time to do that. It's not what our function is. We have worked with ICE, and we, as a law enforcement agency, we have worked the sheriff's office still to this day. If ICE calls them as a law enforcement agency, they'll absolutely work with them. But it's usually in fugitive apprehension, where people are wanted for serious crimes and they've got into our country, and it's not just a, hey, we're going to drive around and, like Nazi Germany, you don't have papers, so we're going to take you to jail. It's not that at all. And I'll give you a prime example of how little we care about illegal immigrants being here. My son is a robbery detective, and they worked on a robbery and went to a robbery. Suspects lived in a house in Siesta Lago, and they knocked on the door a number of times, and the witness said that's where the suspect went. It's like, okay, so they knocked on the door, nobody would come. So finally I get the SWAT team there. They go into the house. There's 4 or 5 people of Mexican descent in the house. They're scared. We find the suspect, who is a legal immigrant, a legal resident of the United States. We take him to jail, and we asked the guys, one of the Spanish guys asked him, well, why didn't you answer the door? And I said, we thought you were ICE. We thought you were going to take us to jail. And they're like, we could care less that you're here. So they all left him there. I mean, we don't have time to, in local law enforcement, we don't have time to deal with the immigration issue. If an immigrant wants to get a driver's license, I have no problem with that. To me, it's better, because at least they're identified as a driver on the street. And, I don't know how many times we've run into the issue where, an illegal immigrant gets in an accident and they're freaked out because they don't have a driver's license, and they flee from the scene. Now they've made it worse for themselves because they've left the scene of an accident. all because they don't have a driver's license. And if they had a driver's license, felt comfortable about that, they probably would have stayed there and, maybe got a ticket. It's an accident. So again, I have no problem with that at all. I mean, and I think that, asking for that and pushing for that is great. Now, if they're a wanted felon from another country and they're here illegally, that's a different issue. That's completely a different issue. So again, the driver's license issue to me is really not a big deal. I'd be in favor of that. Have no problem with that. And again, the immigration issue, I think a lot of people get caught up in that we, local law enforcement, I'm talking about, we drive around and look for people. I mean, I've stopped a number of people in my career that I know are here illegally from a number of countries, and I'm stopping for a traffic violation, and I really don't care that they're here. I just give them back their identification and have a nice day. Because for me to do that, I would have to stand there for hours, call ICE, wait for them to come, if they even showed up. And that's kind of counterproductive to what I should be doing. Most of them are here to make a living and make a better life for themselves. And I can appreciate that. I mean, I have no problem with that at all. So we have bigger things to do, right? There's more violent crime out there, and we should be focusing on those kind of things. What's driving our crime? Residential burglaries. I mean, crime in our county, the biggest crime we have, not that we don't have violent crime, but the biggest crime we have is property crimes. And I'm talking about residential burglaries, theft, car burglaries, those kinds of things. That's the biggest crime. We have violent crime, but not to the extent that Orange County has violent crime. So that's why I kind of think it's unique that we live here with 350,000 plus population, and our violent crime rate has not been very high for decades, which is a plus. So, but I attribute that to the law enforcement that we have here, because I have worked at the sheriff's office, and I would tell you, I've worked with some of the best cops in the state of Florida compared to Orlando, Orange County. I mean, we have some very, very good police officers in this county, at Kissimmee, at St. Cloud, and at the sheriff's office. And we should be proud of the fact that we have those guys here. They help a great deal. So,
Mr. Fisher, I know you said you've lived here for 40 years.
Yeah, since 1980.
Okay. And so, in an effort to help voters get to know you a little bit better, what are some places that you really enjoy in Osceola County?
I like downtown Kissimmee, to be honest with you. You talking about going to and visiting and hanging out at?
Yeah, just in general, if where do you like to unwind? What are some of your favorite low key places that maybe residents from out of town wouldn't know about, or are some of our people moving to Osceola wouldn't know about?
So it's funny because I like downtown Kissimmee. I mean, I've liked downtown Kissimmee for a long time, but in the last 5 or 6 years, it's changed for the better, where they've gotten more restaurants and local places to eat. I like Matador's Tacos, a great deal. The atmosphere and the music, the flamenco dancers there. I don't know if you've ever been there when they have the flamenco dancers, but it's cool. Felix Ortiz's place there, Three Sisters. We enjoy going down there quite a bit. And then just hanging out with friends, and there's just I go all over the place. I don't really have any one specific place, but I mean, we'll go out on West 192 to have dinner. We'll go up to Loop to have dinner. So yeah, it's just we're all over the place. So
I know I see you everywhere at every event. I see you. So I'm curious as to we have a rich tradition of cattle company, and our land is beautiful. Are there any particular parks that you like to hang out with your family or anything?
Well, I mean, most of the time we're a large family. We have some live in St. Cloud here. I mean, I've got a ton of people. So we're usually at people's houses because the grandkids come over and they use the pool. We'll go to their houses. Parks, we enjoy going down to, St. Cloud for 4th of July. We always kind of have a nice place there at the corner of Pennsylvania and 10th. And Lakeshore to watch the fireworks at. So, that's kind of become a tradition where we kind of hang out down there. Kissimmee, downtown Kissimmee, they've done a phenomenal job with their parks in the last number of years. So, just events that we want to go down and take part in. The parks, we enjoy really going to Disney and obviously Universal because I work there. But Disney, we all have passes to Disney, so we'll go out there and just kind of hang out and even if it's for 4 or 5 hours, we'll do that. So we do a lot of things with our family. When even growing up as a parent, we did everything with our kids. I mean, our kids went with us everywhere. To movies, to things like that. And I mean, so we're very family oriented when it comes to just being involved. I mean, I have tons of friends too. So, we'll go to their houses, if they have cookouts, that kind of thing. But, yeah, it's just kind of all over the place. No one particular spot. So.
Thank you. Yes, Osceola County is a beautiful, beautiful place. There's many places to go. So it's like, I go there too for 4th of July. I love it.
We know what's funny is one of the events we have been at over the last year, there have been so many people from South Orange County and Lake County that come to the events here that I was really shocked at. And I'm like, don't you have things like this in Lake County? They're like, no, we really like the events they have here. So that kind of made me feel proud to thinking they're driving all that way, just they could go to Orlando. But, so we still have that hometown feel, even though we're bigger than what we used to be. I think we still have that hometown feel. So.
I agree.
Right.
Well, I really just want to give a shout out to just the law enforcement of Osceola County. We really want to thank you as Osceola Democrats for providing this service, and I really do appreciate that. Mike Fisher, we're at the end of our interview. Are there any last words you want to say to the Osceola Democrats or anybody in Osceola County?
No, I thank you guys a great deal for sending an email out, and I enjoyed this with both of you very much. So
thank you so much.
Getting to know you, Dora, and Lee. I've talked to you a number of times, but got to know you a little bit more tonight. But so again, thank you guys very much for the time, and you guys know how to reach me, and if you have any questions at all, just don't hesitate to ask. So.
Thank you so much, Mike Fisher. I really appreciate it for you coming out and spending a little bit of our tea time together.
Okay. All right. Hope I didn't run my mouth too much.